Hello and welcome to Mystic Visions. This is a monthly tarot reading for Pisces for the month of June. So thank you for joining and let's go ahead and get to your reading. Pisces. Okay, so for Pisces, I have the Five of Cups for your current situation. Five of Cups is about kind of, yeah, you've gone through like maybe a little bit of a loss or something hasn't worked out, or it's just in a way there. So okay, so there's three, five cups in this. There's three of them in the front here that are all spilled over, and then there's two that are still upright behind the figure. And she's a little bit more fixated on the three cups that have fallen than the two that are still upright. And so it's kind of focusing on the bad parts instead of the good parts, and having a little bit less than a positive attitude about it. Right. So this is the situation that you're feeling. The message here is to keep in mind that every loss is also an opportunity or a blessing in disguise. That it's not the end of the world. There are things for you, or ways in which this situation kind of helps you out, or brings new opportunities that were not previously there. Okay. Crossing you or influencing you is the High Priestess, and this is somebody very in tune with their emotions, with their intuition, and so this is a need for you to sort of to accept the good and the bad, to recognize that they kind of go together. If you're constantly seeking after a life with all good and no bad, what you're essentially looking for is to be unconscious. Because what consciousness is the dynamic, the distance between those two extremes, that you experience in various points in your life. So it's like, if there was no good, there would be no bad. If there was no fools, there would be no sages. So this is the energy that's kind of influencing you, that you're having to learn about a little bit, is recognizing both good and bad as utility, instead of having some intrinsic value, right? You're moving away from the devil in the reverse. And so, at times, you were driven by a little bit more of like a base desire, and you have kind of figured out ways around that to devote yourself to a little bit of a higher cause or something like that, something outside of yourself, which makes you a little less prone to being led astray, or finding yourself trapped by your own desires. And so you're moving on from that lesson. You've understood that. You've got that down. But now it's about putting distance between yourself and the situation, such that you can look at every situation as an opportunity and not just a either good or bad thing that's happening to you. A little bit of an odd one for what you're headed toward. You have the chariot in the reverse. Normally, the chariot in the reverse kind of, I always feel there's a lack of self confidence there. There's a feeling like you haven't accomplished enough. But in this case, I'm kind of taking it a little bit differently, because this is where you're headed, right? So it's a need to balance good and bad, hot and cold, right? You also have temperance, you have judgment, you have a lot of balance related cards here, and cards that deal with duality, and this is one such card. But all of these cards that you have, except for what's crossing you, and what's crossing you can be kind of seen as a negative position for a card, but all of these other duality cards are in the negative, or in the upright. I'm sorry, the reversed. So there's kind of a resistance to this duality. There's a resistance to understanding the purpose of it and being comfortable with it. And that's what you're having to go through here. Now, um, your foundation card, Oh, so well, I'm not quite done with that. The chariot in the upright, you can tell this. This is a charioteer. They have two horses. These horses are going, seahorses, are going opposite directions. One's blue, one's red. So it's kind of like opposites are volatile. They're not really compatible. But with this maturity, you're able to take all of that reaction, that energy, and channel it in a particular kind of a way. And that's what you're being asked to do here. So, not a surprise that this is turning out to be a pretty common theme in your reading, because that's what we see from the very first two cards. Okay, your foundation, this represents kind of like the lesson that the universe is trying to teach you. So, the form the lesson takes is this duality thing. So, when you look around you, you're going to see this is a common theme, but there's a deeper meaning to it, and that's what this foundation is. And the deeper meaning to that is sometimes to take on a new paradigm of thought, a new way of thinking. The change is so deep and cuts so much to your core that it requires this death. And this is not a bad omen or anything. This is an explanation. This is kind of more of like, think of a phoenix, right? They die and burn up, and then they're born again from the ashes. So what this means is, instead of just trying to adapt your current way of thinking, it's really like the old you is kind of passing away, and there's a new you reborn, a new way of thinking. So another way I might visualize this in perhaps a little bit more innocuous way is think about like I know when I was a child, I was really, really afraid of the deep end of the pool. And to be fair, at one point I fell into a pool and nearly drowned. So I had reason to be, but I was very, very afraid of going into the deep end of the pool. And I couldn't swim at the time when I almost drowned. So, but even after I learned how to swim, I still didn't want to go anywhere near that deep end. And it caused me some stress, because anytime I was at the pool, part of me really wanted to go into that deep end, but I just didn't feel like I could. I felt like it was something beyond me, right? So eventually one day, I kind of got tired of that. I got tired of feeling that way, and I just sort of went for it. I jumped in, and after that, finding out that I could swim, that I wasn't going to drown in the deep end because I knew how to swim, it was ushering in almost a new version of me. I didn't react to the same way at looking at the deep end anymore. And so it's so violent sometimes that it really does feel like the old you has died, because your reactions to the world around you have changed so dramatically that you scarcely even recognize yourself, right? So that's what this means, is that occasionally, to learn these types of lessons, to do these, you don't look for something that feels familiar or something that feels under control. Sometimes it's about really like jumping in the deep end and going with it. When it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel like you should, you just kind of have to go with it. And you're being asked, I mean, that's the high priestess. Your gut feeling. You're being asked to follow your gut here. And I think that you're on your way, but it can be a challenge for you. Okay, so what's in your mind is the Ten of Swords. So, this is anxiety. This is, and not just anxiety. The Nine of Swords also has a little bit more of a straight up anxiety. This is on the other side of it. This is like feeling like all is lost, feeling like there's no hope left. And it can be kind of like a defeated feeling. It's the other side of anxiety. So the 9 and the 10 are similar, very similar. But this, on the other hand, is when the anxiety is built up to the point where it's kind of like, again, a blessing in disguise, because it comes to a point where it boils over. It can't really get any worse. And so at that point, you recognize, oh, hey, I'm in the deep end, but I'm still alive. I'm able to swim. And it's sort of that realization, being in that dark spot, in the place that you were avoiding more than anything, but then simultaneously realizing that, miraculously everything is okay, now there's this sort of newfound joy that begins to swell up. It's like a spark that sets off a wildfire. But this is kind of where your mind is right now. It's that feeling like it's all lost, that you're kind of at the end of your rope. Um, but it's just a matter of time before that new mindset breaks through. So, be on the lookout for that and fan that flame when it arrives, and this doesn't feel quite so bad. Eventually, you get used to this process of, death and rebirth. And at that point, it's like, now I can swim. Now I'm good. I'm enjoying this, and I recognize that this is what I was meant to do as a human instead of being safe all the time or comfortable. Okay, so for your advice card, you've got the justice in the reverse. So, justice, this is a lot about fairness, logic, different things like that. But there's a sense that things haven't really gone totally fairly for you. So, there's a little bit of an imbalance there. But recognize that it's okay. Things do naturally, what goes around comes around. So don't equalize the scales by making yourself less worthy of, whatever you lost. That can be a person's natural reaction because there's this sort of tension that occurs. And so you might go make some rash decisions or something and sort of prove that things actually went the way they should. So instead, maintain that tension, stay the person that deserved not to lose whatever you lost or not to go through the situation that you went through. Stay that person, but allow things to naturally develop and allow your mindset to shift and to be okay, to be almost, I don't want to say numb because that sounds bad, and it's likely to be taken the wrong way. But I'm almost feeling like remain numb to the bad things that are occurring. So I'll add a disclaimer. If you can help the situation, if you do something about the situation, don't just remain numb to it. That's burying your head in the sand and pretending things are hunky dory when they're really not, right? On the other hand, if this is a situation that you can't really do anything about, then yes, practice that becoming a little bit numb to it, to allowing. So, the severity of it is what really makes the difference here. So, if you lost a job or something like that and you can't really help it, you can't do anything about it, treat that as the most absolute positive thing you can. Now you can move on to something that you actually deserve. You can move on to something better. On the other hand, if somebody is being abusive towards you, I would never advise you to just put up with that and say, well, eventually I'll get what I deserve. So this takes a little wisdom in this interpretation, but that's where this justice comes in, because this is this is karmic. This is, if you're doing the right thing and you truly have been wronged, then things are going to balance out in the long run. That this can be a blessing in disguise. And I see signs that your subconscious is trying to communicate and break through, that your intuition is wanting for you to listen instead of trying to think your way through things. Okay. All right. So your environment is temperance, also in the reverse. So the, temperance can be a kind of a violent process. It can be, the mixing of, again, the hot and cold, very familiar theme in your reading here. But this, this is what you look out around you and see. This isn't necessarily you so much as either a person immediately around you, somebody in your household, or even the society around you at large. But there's this resistance to go through these things that seem like struggles. So it's very possible that you've been programmed to think that life should be sunshine and roses all the time. And so you might be resistant to going through tough trials, or to let them break you down, or make your mentality negative, because others around you have that same tendency. Others around you don't look at difficulties, or struggles or arguments as something that ultimately makes things better. They look at it as a negative, right? So don't be afraid to sometimes argue, or to sometimes allow these somewhat extreme forces to come out and interact with each other, and to react, you know. What we have for your fears card is the Page of Coins. A little strange there, thinking about that Page of Coins in the fears. You know, the page is a kind of a childlike energy, and in the realm of the coins, this is somebody who's, embarking off on a new journey or a new transition, starting something out fresh. This kind of seems like you might be afraid to do that. You might be afraid to go down that road. Finances might not be awesome for you, so you might feel as though you have to stick to whatever plan you had, or that might be where that Five of Cups comes in too, where you're feeling like loss is just unacceptable, or setting you back. But on the contrary, if you've got less to lose, then perhaps it's going to be easier for you to change your course completely and get on a better track, and it's really just how much are you willing to get in your own way because you don't like a certain path, or the way you think about it is not ideal, So don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid to be a child. Don't be afraid to not know, because that is actually a much more fertile ground for things that are wildly successful in the long run. The knowing, the maturity, and all that'll come regardless eventually. But don't be seeking that out beforehand. That's kind of putting the cart before the horse. If you're seeking to be the responsible, strong, person right out the gate, you're trying to gain the status without going through the struggles that are required to earn that status. So obviously that doesn't work. So don't be afraid to embark on some journey of self-discovery. Okay. For your overall message, there's the Emperor in the reverse. So there's too much masculine energy is what's going on here. And that High Priestess is, that divine feminine. Whereas the Emperor is a little bit more of like a male archetype. The Magician is really the divine male, but right down a little bit lower than that is the Emperor, which is, the masculine archetype. So doesn't necessarily have all of the best qualities of masculinity, but it is relentlessly masculine nonetheless. So sometimes this includes more of the imbalanced masculine, whereas that divine masculine is a little bit more balanced. Okay, so what that means in this case is being a little overbearing, or sometimes even bossy, or too controlling, not having enough flexibility, things like that. So being the overall message, or sort of the overall outcome, this is also in the reverse. So this is something that you're kind of trying to correct here. You're trying to correct this overly masculine or controlling, or trying to find a better word for it, almost obsessive, right? Almost wanting to direct the way things are going instead of going with the flow and following your intuition. Okay, so you're making a shift from this more masculine type side to having a better balance of that divine feminine, which is receptive, and instead of projecting, all the time. Okay, So that's about it for your reading today. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave me some comments or questions if you have them. And I will see you guys next time for your next reading. Thank you.